Hello and welcome to the latest video in my quest to becoming a full-time comic creator. So this past week I've been focusing on something that I tend to underthink when creating comics, where art and writing really combine, that is, sound effects. And in this video I'm going to talk you through what I've learned about applying sound effects more deliberately and walk you through a page where I've tried to put those ideas into practice. Now, sound effects aren't something that I normally give too much thought to. I know that I should, but usually I'm just more focused on getting the right sound. Does this guy getting punched sound like more of a biff or a pow? Or does this guy's head popping sound like more of a squelch or a splurge? I realised that I'd been treating sound effects as something that I would just tag on at the end, rather than an integral part of the storytelling language on the page. And this meant that my use of sound effects didn't always blend brilliantly with my art. So I knew that I had a page coming up that was going to be quite sound effect heavy, and I wanted to use this as an opportunity to learn, develop and improve how I use sound effects in my comics. But before we head into it, I just want to state that I am not an expert, and this isn't me telling you how you should apply sound effects to your comics. This is me running through what I've learned on my journey to improve as an artist and a storyteller, some of which might work for you and some of which might not. But if you do have any comments on how I can improve further, please post those in the comments below. This is all about learning and improving. So with all that in mind, here's the page from my upcoming comic where I've put what I learned into practice. It's a fairly simple scene, there's no dialogue, but there's a lot of physical action, which made it a good test case for sound effects doing the bulk of the storytelling work. So to start with, I've removed all the sound effects so you can see the before. I think you can tell what's meant to be happening here. The visuals are clear, but I do think they leave a little bit to be desired and they are a little bit lifeless. And here's the after. I really think this brings the page to life and more clearly communicates what's happening in each panel. Now I'll walk you through my thinking and process for why the sound effects look the way they do and why they're placed where they are. And for me, it really comes down to two key areas: composition and lettering. Starting with composition, the first thing is simply making sure that you leave space for your sound effects. You really need to think about them when you're drafting your page, when you're doing your thumbnails, and not after the fact. They affect your page layout, your panel balance and where your reader's eye goes. For example, in this panel here, I've got a character who's dabbing the sweat off his head. If I'd shown the character's full head, I would have had to shrink the sound effect down. That would have made less of an impact and shifted the focus away from what I wanted to show, which was this guy's nervous and he's having to dab that sweat off his head. There's also the question of clarity. I didn't want the sound effects to obscure the action, especially in moments where the physical movement is doing a lot of the work. So in this panel here, I've got the same character tightening his tie, and I didn't want to obscure the action of the tie being tightened, so I made sure that I left some space to the left where that sound effect could be placed. If I'd drawn this as I traditionally do and centered that character, then it would have been off balance and it wouldn't have looked great compositionally. Also, as part of the composition, if a sound effect has a clear source, it's worth thinking about how you show that. Can you visually anchor your sound effect to where it's coming from? So in this first panel here, where this helicopter's landing and the wheels are making a bump noise as they hit that tarmac, I wanted to show those bumps emanating from the wheels themselves as they make contact with that landing pad and help connect the sound effect to its source. And the second big area is lettering. You need to use a font that's clear, readable and doesn't distract from the page. For most of my sound effects, I use a font called BD Cartoon Shout. It's completely free and I've linked it in the description below if you want to try it yourself. I also tried to make the sound effect look like the sound. So in this panel where the character is dabbing sweat off his forehead, I've added little beads of sweat coming off the lettering to visually tie it into the action taking place. Also in this panel, where these characters are stepping off the helicopter, I've staggered the letters in the word step to make them look like a visual representation of some actual steps. However, in this panel, where this character is straightening their ID card, I wanted to use a font that allowed me to visually represent that. I wanted the sound effect itself to help sell the action, where it's going from crooked to straight, and a more rounded font wouldn't have allowed me to communicate that as clearly. One really useful lettering tip that I picked up from Lorenzo Everington's How to Think When You Draw is to only keep letters the same size for smooth, continuous sounds. For everything else, mixing up the lettering sizes adds energy and texture, and you can see that here where the uneven letters help give that bump sound more of an impact. So there you have it. I hope that those top tips on sound effects in comics were as useful for you as they were for me. And with that page finished, that brings me up to 6 pages complete. Now, progress has been a little slower this past week thanks to Christmas and New Year, but I'm hoping to pick things up again and get this comic finished and printed as soon as possible. And if you're interested in seeing that happen, feel free to stick around. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.